Welcome to the July 2024 Q&A for the garden, for the homestead, for the food forest, for the animals, for all things good outside and permaculture. These Q&A that we do every month are made possible really by our Patreon community, who also supplies the questions that we'll be going through every single month. So normally we do these live. Right now I'm at a different summer location, so these are going to be pre-recorded. But get comfortable, get a nice cup of tea or coffee or beverage of your choice, old grapes, whatever it happens to be. Or if you're out and about and around the yard and just enjoying listening in, feel free to put your phone in your pocket, put your earbuds in, and listen along. So before we get into the awesome questions that we've got for this month, we've got 10 questions. I want to hit on the top 3 things that I would be doing in the garden, in the food forest, in each of the major growing zone categories. So just like on the website, permaculturefx.com, we have 2 major kind of growing zones in the continental United States. USDA zones 3 through 8, which generally speaking is the North, the Midwest, and then USDA zones 9 through 11, which could be more the arid tropical, like California, Texas, that sort of thing, or it could be the subtropical, like here in Central Florida. So obviously there are a lot of nuances that go along with every one of those growing zones. I mean, for example, 9A here in Central Florida is not going to be identical to 9A in, Central California. So always rely on good local knowledge. The goal with these to-do list is to get you sparked, to give you the general ideas of the things that you could be or should be doing in your garden and in your food forest this month. But there's going to be some local things that are unique to the nuances of your microclimate that you should really pay attention to. So always tap into the local knowledge, get in the local groups, whether that is digitally on social media or going to your local county extension office and joining there. So for USDA zones 3 through 8 are Midwest, northern climates. You are in full on growing season. Like you're eating, the garden is abundant, the food forest is abundant. This is the time of year when I lived in Kansas City, for 15 years. I miss this time of year. I mean, it's hot, don't get me wrong, but it is absolutely gorgeous. A lot of the berry bushes are producing right now. The stone fruits are starting to become ripe. Just absolutely beautiful. I was talking to my family up in Michigan, and they're having a really kind of a wet summer actually this year. So things are really, really green, really, really abundant. So very exciting if you are in USDA zones 3 through 8. Well, those of us in 9 through 11, it's just hot. It's hot, it's sticky, it is humid. Did I mention it's hot? So USDA zones 3 through 8, you have, all of our greatest envy at this point in time. So the 3 things that I would be doing if I were living in that zone still. First and foremost, this time of year during your growing season, compost, and lots of foliar sprays. So you are feeding those plants, whether this is the annual vegetable garden or the food forest, house plants, you're giving them the nutrients that they need to really, really thrive. Now in July, a lot of things are in full flower or in fruit set. So those micronutrients are really important this time of year. So in my foliar sprays, no matter what growing zone I'm in, this month I'm doing a lot of sea kelp. It's not technically a fertilizer. Kelp actually helps the absorption of minerals and nutrients, so it kind of makes the plant hungry, so to speak. So I do the liquid kelp fish emulsion, which is a very light nitrogen-based fertilizer. And then typically a probiotic, my probiotic of choice is BioAg. Now you could use JDAM or Korean, farming methods if you wanted to, but I use BioAg. It's a little bit easier. And in the garden calendar on the website this month, there is an 11-minute separate talk on using probiotics in the garden, what it does, how to use it the best, the dosage, the results that you can expect, that sort of thing. So that's really what I'm using for the most part in the garden. Is I'm doing lots of compost. If I'm in USDA zones 3 through 8, I'm doing a lot of foliar sprays. How often? probably every other week, because remember, you don't have a year-round growing cycle, so you're really feeding the whole growing season. So I lessen the dosage, do like micro doses more often to get a little bit more bang for your buck in those cooler USDA growing zones. Now, this is also the time of year that your plants, whether they're in the garden or in the food forest, they're really needing a lot of potassium and phosphorus. And so I would be using bone meal as your fertilization of choice. Now, for most USDA zones 3 through 8, you can be fertilizing even nitrogen this time of year. Those of us that are near coastal areas, we're not doing nitrogen, this time of year, because we're not wanting to encourage algae blooms because of our high heat, rainy season, that sort of thing. But if you're in USDA zones 3 through 8, not really something that you need to be worried about. Second thing that I would be doing in USDA zones 3 through 8 would be deadheading. A lot of perennial flowers. You can get second and third blooms to just continue that blossom cycle, all summer long, but you do need to deadhead. So I like to save some for the wild songbirds. So when I deadhead, a lot of times I'll just deadhead a little bit lower. I'll turn them upside down, tie some string on them, and then hang them by the bird feeders and let the birds get the seeds off of them, or I'll seed save, pass those things on for somebody else. But if you stay on the deadheading, you're going to get another bloom probably end of this month and then into August and September. So just stay on the deadheading to keep that perennial garden really fresh and really clean looking, and then make sure that you save some for the wild songbirds. And then number 3, it's time to start fall crops in the veggie garden. I know that sounds horrible. It's July. We should not be thinking about the fall, but we should be thinking about the fall. Now, you guys in USDA zones 3 through 8, you're thinking cold season crops already. So you're doing brassicas, the broccoli, the cabbage, the cauliflower. So you're getting some of those ones that take a little bit longer to come into fruition and for their harvest time. You can wait a little bit still on radishes and beets and that sort of thing, some of those more root crops. But right now you're doing a lot of brassicas, a lot of potatoes, getting ready for that fall growing season. So I hate to say it, but it is time to start thinking along those lines. So if you are in USDA zones 9 through 11, it's a little bit different for us right now, because many of our food forests are in high production. Our annual vegetable gardens are pretty much asleep right now, or they're done. They have a cover crop or something on them. So if in the food forest right now is chop and drop season. So you are taking Mexican sunflower, any of the Tithionias, whether it's the rotundifolia or the diversifolia, chop and drop as much as you possibly can. The cassias, the beans, the peas, the legumes, the sun hemp you're chopping and dropping as much as you possibly can right now. Keep that nutrient cycle turning over. Remember, those beans and peas and legumes, they actually need to die in order to give you that nitrogen. It's not one of those things where you just plant it and you magically get all the nitrogen that you want. It doesn't work that way. You have to be a part of that process. You get to be a part of that process, turning over nutrients. So you want to complete that cycle from growth to maturity, putting it back in the soil, growth to maturity, putting it back in the soil as many times as you possibly can during the growing season. Now, what I really would encourage you to do, there's a whole separate video for those of you that are on Patreon that teaches you how to chop and drop, because there really is a right way to do it and there is a wrong way to do it. And if you don't use the correct process, the downside is you could be growing those nitrogen fixers for nothing. And that sucks, but we have to be a part of the process and apply the right strategies in order to get the most bang for our buck. Otherwise, that atmospheric or that nitrogen is going to be released back up into the atmosphere and it was collected for nothing. So there are certain strategies that you can employ and that you can implement in order to sequester that nitrogen back into the soil around the root base right where you want it. So if you are in the Patreon community, make sure that you check out that class. It's in the library with all of the other resources. Second thing that I would be doing in USDA zones 9 through 11 is water less frequently, but water deeply. So it's the opposite of the American front yard, which is a whole other ridiculous conversation. So instead of watering every day for 15 or 20 minutes, forget about it. Water once a week and water for like 1 or 2 hours. Like seriously water it a long time. Now, if you're in a really, really dry, arid climate, I'd veer on the side of once a week for like 2 hours. Water really, really deeply and less frequently. The way that you tell really if those plants need water, if they start to sag, that's not a bad thing. That is not your plant screaming for water. That's your plant going, hey, my leaves are going a little bit dormant, so my roots can go out and search for the water. Now, if you wake up in the morning and your plants have already fainted, the leaves are already wilted, you got a problem. You do need to water, more frequently. But in general, if the plants are in the ground, water less frequently and water really, really deeply. It's also a great time of year as you're watering or doing your foliar sprays, which is, always early in the morning or at sunset. Get that bioag in, your probiotic sprays, your Korean natural farming sprays, your JDEM, whatever probiotic and nutrient sprays you're doing. That's pretty much our way of fertilizing in USDA zones 9 through 11 all summer is our chop and drop and our foliar sprays. So we're not doing a lot of actual soil amending right now, maybe some light composting, but very, very light. We're really done with that right now for the summer. So mainly it's going to be that chop and drop and foliar sprays. And then last but not least, it's time to start planting nightshades. So our annual vegetable gardens right now all should have, I hope, have cover crops on them. So we're not really doing much in the garden right now for the most part. So most gardens that I help encourage are all doing beans, they're doing peas, they're doing legumes, they're doing a lot of sun hemp. I love the biomass that sun hemp creates is absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. My friend Victoria always uses that word at a natural farm. So it's a really great way to build that soil, but it is time to get the seed trays out and start planting those nightshades. So start thinking of tomatoes, of peppers, of eggplants. So we're starting to wake up, after some summer, rest and relaxation, and it is time to start that annual vegetable gardening. I'm gonna have a little sip of tea here. So that's kind of the top 3 things that I'd be doing in each of those USDA growing zones. Now, aside from those 3 things, I would say no matter where you live, summer months is an ideal time to deworm your livestock, your poultry, farm animals, dogs, whatever. I use the basic H method and then I repopulate the rumen or the crop or the gut using a probiotic that I get from SCD Probiotics. There's always a link for those in the calendar. So let's get into the questions for the month of July. So these 10 questions we're going to just tackle in order from how they came in. These questions are always supplied by our Patreon community. So if you are interested, you can go to patreon.com/permaculturefx and join us there. But these questions we'll tackle kind of one at a time. So the first one. When adding compost, should you pull away the chips or just add compost on top of the chips and then a few more wood chips? We're specifically talking food forest. Honestly, doesn't matter. If you have access to more wood chips, I'm always all about layering, whether that's wood chips, straw, grass, leaf clippings. That lasagna method is really going to give you a lot of different soil microbiome activity, different probiotics, healthy nematodes, earthworms. It gives that habitat for good, healthy bugs, that sort of thing. So I like to layer myself. Now, if you don't have access to other things, worst case scenario, pull those wood chips back, add some compost, always around the drip line, and then bury it back close. So what you don't want to do, so pretend this pen is my plant, don't put your compost right here. You want to go out to the drip line, the edge of the canopy, and put your compost or your amendments there, because that's where the more hairy roots are that are going to be the ones that absorb into the plant itself. We want to keep things away from the root flare around that tree because that is actually transpiring. It's actually breathing, so to speak. So we don't want to be covering up that root flare with compost or with wood chips for that matter. So always keep those amendments away from the base. Question number 2. How do I control weevils in the garden? I hate the evil weevils. Weevils in the garden are an absolute pain in the butt. They can be very hard to, I don't want to say diagnose, but to find that they are actually the culprit. So when you have weevils or, insect or fungal problems in general, my first line of defense is neem spray. Now, neem spray is not systemic. It is not going to inoculate the plant for 3, 4, 5, 6 days and treat it. It's kind of a one-time within 24, 36 hours. It's no longer going to be active. So what I don't want to do ever, no matter where you're located, is apply a neem oil during the daytime. A couple reasons. One, it's an oil, so you don't want to be burning your plant. But secondly, and most importantly, that's when our native pollinators, our honeybees, our butterflies are the most active. I don't want to be spraying them. Most bees and pollinators, by the time the sun starts to go down, they're going dormant for the night, they're going to sleep. So that's a much better and safer time to apply the neem oil. Because remember, neem oil is going to kill pretty much any insect. So if you're spraying it during the day and you're hitting those honeybees and butterflies, you're probably doing more harm than good. So neem spray is probably my first approach. Second option is you can pick bay leaves, either the wild bay that is native in Florida or the actual culinary bay leaf. Make a really strong tea, throw bay leaves, stems, and sticks into a crock pot, brew it for 5, 6, 7 hours or overnight, strain it out, put it in a spray bottle, spray the bay on the tree. Now that is not going to kill insects long term, but it does work as a deterrent to them. And then if you know that you have or suspect that you have the weevils that are in the soil, because they can go into the soil, they'll attack the roots of your tree. Probably the best approach is getting some beneficial nematodes. So we always think nematodes are bad. The kingdom nematoda is actually massive. There's thousands and thousands of nematodes. There's a small amount, a very small fraction of those nematodes that we label as bad nematodes, but we don't want to throw the whole rest of that kingdom under the bus. So get some beneficial nematodes, add that to the soil, and basically they will help kill off the weevils or their eggs that are left in the soil. So number 3, where would you plant Seminole pumpkins? Anywhere. Where would you plant Seminole pumpkins in a food forest, or would you not at all because they can apparently take over? That's one of those it depends questions. It's probably easier, instead of me telling you where to put them, it's easier for me to tell you where not to put them. Because they're going to be in that 18 to 24 inches tall, the leaves are really thick. You don't want to plant it near a lot of herbaceous layers. So if I've got, pollinators like purple coneflower or laetris or coreopsis or whatever that's in the midst of my food forest, or even tropical spinaches, those Seminole pumpkins are going to take over, But if it's an area that has a little bit of space, 6, 8, 10 feet, I'm probably going to plant some Seminole pumpkins there. Now, what I don't like to do is plant Seminole pumpkins at the same time as a tree that is currently or going to be fruiting when the Seminole pumpkins are producing, because I don't want to tax the soil too much. So if it's something that's going to be fruiting in the fall, i.e., figs or avocados, then I'm probably not planting Seminole pumpkins there. However, things that are more fruiting in the springtime, our peaches, our plums, our nectarines, those are great because those are kind of dormant in the fall and they're not going to be awake for a little while. So that's an okay time to go ahead and plant those Seminole pumpkins. The other nice thing is that's going to really protect the soil. Give it some shade, gives you an opportunity to let that soil rest and kind of repair a little bit. So that would be my thought as to where to plant them. I haven't really had a problem with them taking over too bad in the food forest, to be honest. Number 4, we are looking to fill some bald patches in with clover, primarily for grazing. Any suggestions on how to best plant it in sandy soil? Second part of that is, will it overseed Bahia? Well, I'll address the second part first. No. Bahia is very aggressive, very fast growing. It's probably going to steal the nutrients before the clover. If you do have Bahia, option 1 is either put your animals and livestock on it first, like chickens, and then mow it down so it's really, really short, and then go ahead and add your clover seed. or, kill the area off or whatever first and then do your clover. Now, when I do clover in really sandy soil, I add a little bit of compost first or run the chickens through, use my garden rake, rough the soil up, broadcast, usually with one of those hand cranking spreaders, spread my clover seed. And then I typically will take my garden rake really lightly because it only wants to be in the ground under the soil like 1/8 of an inch. So just barely covered. And then I usually take straw or hay and I just spread that over the area and let it come up. Now, clover does need to be watered every single day for like 15 or 20 minutes to keep that seed moist and the inoculum moist until it has its first set of true leaves. So I'm not talking about the first leaves that come out. Those first leaves are the cotyledons, which doesn't actually count as a leaf that's doing photosynthesis. That's just from what was in the seed. That second set that actually looks like the clover leaf, once you see that, you can slowly start backing off on the water. Usually like 1 or 2 days, a week, you're still going to want to water it until the clover does get established. Once it's established, it usually does pretty good, even here in our sandy sites. It is a little harder to get clover to grow in full sun in Florida. It does better with a little bit of shade protection in my personal experience. Number 5, we've been uprooting a lot of ragweed that unfortunately went to seed outside of our main fence line. It is very prolific. It was starting to creep into the main yard to take over with no sign of slowing down. The sheep really don't seem to like the ragweed much. Is there anything to plant in its place once it's uprooted that will compete with it so it doesn't return? This answer is probably the same. I think I would give the same answer no matter what growing zone I'm in. I would probably do chicory. Ragweed has a pretty good taproot. So what that's doing is it's actually, the benefit ragweed has is it's bringing up a lot of minerals. And so animals that love minerals are going to love that ragweed. Now, if you guys are using mineral blocks and salt blocks and that sort of thing, you have good, healthy sheep or cattle or horses, they're probably not going to go after the ragweed. So instead, I would find another kind of taproot based plant that's going to be a similar height above the ground. So for me, that would be chicory. The nice thing with chicory is it is very high in minerals. So it's really good for magnesium, bringing up copper, manganese, boron. Chicory root is also a coffee replacement. I mean, there's not really a coffee replacement. It's a coffee substitute or additive. We'll just say that. The leaves are very, very medicinal. The flowers can be used to make a dye. And it's a great pollinator. So I would say chicory is probably a really good choice. If you don't want to do chicory and you want something that's a little more like decorative, cosmos, sulfur cosmos, that's the native cosmos here in the South, is a great one. Very similar growth habit. In fact, the leaves look almost identical to ragweed. There's been some times where I have to let it flower before I realize if it's ragweed or if it's the native sulfur cosmos. So that would be my thought there. Number 6, is it too late to mulch our food forest? Amazing question. No matter where you're at, the answer is no. It is always a good time for mulching your food forest, for buying cookies locally. My favorite place is Sweet Cups in Central Florida and Claremont. They got voted best cookies Disney like last month, and probably my favorite thing ever. And the owners are awesome. So if you're in Claremont area, Sweet Cup Chef, it's amazing. So yeah, there's never a bad time to do your food forest mulching. There's never a bad time to get cookies. And there's never a wrong time to get more chickens. Number 7, we have found that our butterfly pea is very prolific, wondering if it would be good to use as a ground cover. That's a good question. Honestly, I don't know. I've never tried butterfly pea as a ground cover. I'm in the same growing zone as the person that asked this, so 9A, 9B. And they can be very easy to perennialize here. It would be interesting to try. Now, because they are aggressive and they do have the tendrils, I would not use it as a ground cover where it can climb up a tree, like a fig tree, because it'll probably just take over that tree. I would make sure it has a lot of space to spread out. So that's a fun experiment. I'd be interested in trying it out with you. So let's figure that one out. Is it okay for me to say I don't know in these Q&A? I think that's okay. I'll phone a friend. Number 8. Is it okay to cut back dead blackberry canes this time of year? Yes. When the blackberry canes are dead, cut them back whenever. I would not be cutting back the ones that are going to be dying off this year. So normally blackberries, there's like a 3-year cycle. The first year that they grow, they're just going to be producing the cane and the foliage. The second year for blackberry canes is going to be their highest production year. Their third year is going to be a low production year, and then they die off. So typically what I do is if I have a row of blackberries, and I'll do it like coming at you like this, I have my year 1, I train to go this way, and I have like a clothesline that I'll tie them to. Second year canes are going in the middle. Third year canes are going on the side. So I have a row here. They're all planted in the middle. So I have like a row here of T-post with wire going across, a row here of T-post and wire, row here of T-post and wire. And then what makes it easy is that I can go through and cut all of this line when it's done, and I know these years are being rotated, if that makes sense. But yeah, this is a great time to cut back those blackberry canes if they're dead. Hopefully you have thornless blackberries. Number 9, our property came with 2 existing peach trees. Very jealous. One of them is fruiting right now. Weird. Any idea which variety of fruits that it is this time of year? I don't know, because this person is in Florida. I don't know that it's a specific variety that's fruiting right now. I think those trees are probably just a little bit confused. We had a really weird winter where we had a lot more water than usual, then a crazy dry spring, and now it's finally getting wet again. And I would say the tree is probably just confused. You can take a picture of the fruit for me and just upload that into the Patreon chat. Cut the fruit in half and show me the outside and the inside of the fruit, and then we can try and identify it from there. But I would say more than likely the tree is just confused. It's probably not fruiting right now because of the variety. And question number 10, this is our last question. Is there a general rule on how many air layering sites that you can do per tree at a time? The general rule of thumb with either air layering or hard pruning your trees is try not to do more than 1/4 of the tree at a time, never more than 1/3. So 1/4 is about right. 1/3 is if you really got to prune that tree back, like it's sick or it's diseased or it hasn't been pruned in 10 years and you're doing a really hard pruning. No more than 1/3 of the tree in 1 calendar year. Try to do no more than 1/4 of the tree. And then as far as the air layering goes, when you're looking down on the tree, and so this is the top of the tree, the trunk is right here, no more than 1/4 of the tree to 1/3 of the primary branches, I would be air layering at one time. Now you can do all the air layering that you want over time, but I wouldn't be removing any more than 1/4 to 1/3 of the tree at any one time. Because remember, to air layer, that's requiring a lot of nutrients and a lot of growth hormone to form those new roots around your air layering pack. So that's a lot of stress on the tree. Now, because that is a lot of stress, it is also taking up a lot more nutrients than normal. So when you're air layering, especially if you've got like more than one on a tree, foliar sprays. I mean, I'm talking probably like a half-dosed foliar spray, even like once a week. And that's really going to help with that root formation, especially the kelp, because that's going to help with the nutrient absorption in the midst of that process and kind of spark the growing. The other one to really add in would be humus or folic acid are really good ones to add into the soil. The company that I get those from myself is GS Plants, and they are a Florida-based company. I do not get any money from them, but I would love to because they're an amazing company. So yeah, that's the general rule with how many air layer sites. So those are the Q&A for the month of July. I'd say again, no matter where you are this month, this is a great month for deworming your animals and your livestock, probiotics for animals and livestock, probiotics in the garden, especially those foliar sprays. So if you have only got time for one thing this month, do a foliar spray in your garden toward the evening or early morning is best, so it gives it nice, good amount of time to absorb into the tree without it getting too hot or cooked by the sun. So regardless of where you are, get outside, talk to your neighbors, share some fruit, try and forage a little bit every day, and just, get outside, get your shoes off, be barefoot, and as always, have fun, and I will see you in the garden. Now, for those of you that this is your first time joining in for a live, before I sign off, I do want to say thank you to our Patreon community, both for your monthly support, for your incredible questions that flow in through the chat, that come in through the classes that we do every month, that come in through the PDFs. I love the dialogue. I love continually growing with you, even with that pigeon pea or the butterfly pea question. So lots of great questions to spark us all and to keep us going. So again, thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Have fun. See you in the garden.